The asteroid field around Valthera 7 looked like a graveyard of broken rocks, floating in the endless black of space. Tom Reed pushed his mining drill deeper into the surface of the largest chunk, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air of his environmental suit. He had been working alone on this remote mining station for 8 months now, and the silence was starting to get to him. His scanner beeped softly, showing another vein of the rare crystals that powered human starships. But as he adjusted the settings, something else caught his attention. The readings were all wrong. There was metal mixed in with the rock, twisted and scorched. Tom pulled back his drill and examined the surface more carefully. This wasn't natural asteroid formation. This was wreckage. The debris was definitely alien, with the distinctive curved design that made Tom's stomach clench with fear. Kitharan ships. The reptilian warriors of the Empire had been at war with humanity for 3 years now, and their vessels were unmistakable. The metal was still warm, which meant this crash was recent. Very recent. Tom should have called it in immediately. Protocol demanded that any Kitharan activity be reported to military command within the hour. But something held him back. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the crushing loneliness of working alone in space for so long. He activated his suit's emergency beacon, but set it to record rather than transmit. Whatever he found, he wanted to see it first. The wreckage was bigger than he initially thought. As Tom carefully moved chunks of asteroid away, he revealed more of the ship's hull. It had been a small craft, probably a scout or courier vessel. The impact had crushed most of it, but one section near what might have been the crew quarters was still partially intact. Tom's hands shook as he cut through the twisted metal with his plasma torch. Every story he had heard about Kitharans made them sound like monsters. 8 feet tall, covered in scales, with claws that could tear through steel and acid that could dissolve human bone. They ate their enemies alive and showed no mercy to prisoners. The military briefings always ended the same way. If you encounter Kitharans, fight or run. There was no third option. But when Tom finally broke through into the ship's interior, he found something he didn't expect. Silence. The emergency. Lighting was still working, casting everything in a dim red glow. The air was thin but breathable, which meant the life support had been working until very recently. Tom moved carefully through the cramped corridor, his helmet light cutting through the darkness. He found the first body in what looked like a small storage room. The Kitharan was exactly as terrifying as the briefings had described. Even dead, it was massive, with thick scales covering its body and claws the length of Tom's fingers. But something was wrong with the scene. The creature was curled around something, its arms wrapped protectively around a small bundle. Tom's breath caught in his throat. The bundle was moving. He approached slowly, every instinct screaming at him to run. The dead Kitharan was female. Tom realized. Her body was still warm and there were no obvious wounds. She had probably died when the ship's life support failed, maybe from smoke inhalation or oxygen loss. But she had used her last moments to protect whatever she was holding. Tom carefully pried the creature's arms apart. Inside was the smallest living thing he had ever seen. A Kitharan cub, no bigger than his fist, covered in soft scales that looked almost like fur. Its eyes were still closed, and it was making tiny mewling sounds that reminded Tom of the kittens his family used to rescue back on Earth. The cub was clearly dying. Its breathing was shallow, and its small body felt cold against Tom's gloved hands. He should leave it here. This was the offspring of humanity's greatest enemy. In a few years, if it lived, it would grow into a killing machine that would show no mercy to humans. The smart thing, the logical thing, was to walk away. But Tom couldn't do it. The tiny creature fit in the palm of his hand, helpless and alone. Its mother had died protecting it, and now Tom was the only thing standing between this small life and death. He thought about his sister's cat, who had died giving birth to a litter of kittens. Tom had bottle-fed those kittens every 2 hours, for weeks, sleeping on the kitchen floor next to their box to make sure they stayed warm. This was different, though. This wasn't a kitten. This was a predator that would grow up to be humanity's enemy. But looking down at the tiny, fragile thing in his hands, Tom couldn't see a monster. He just saw something small and helpless that needed care. Tom made his decision. He carefully wrapped the cub in one of his spare work shirts and tucked it inside his suit, close to his body for warmth. The tiny creature's mewling grew softer, and Tom could feel its small heart beating rapidly against his chest. The trip back to his mining station felt longer than usual. Tom kept checking on the cub, adjusting the makeshift nest he had created inside his suit. By the time he reached the station, the tiny creature had stopped making noise entirely. Tom was afraid it had died until he felt the soft flutter of its breathing. His station was small but comfortable, with living quarters, a workshop, and a small medical bay. Tom had no idea what Kitharans ate or how to care for their young, but he had basic medical supplies and a food synthesizer. He would figure it out as he went. Tom set the cub down on a soft towel under a heat lamp in his workshop. In the better light, he could see that it was actually quite beautiful. Its scales were a soft gray-green color, and its tiny claws were no bigger than pins. It looked so different from the adult Kitharans in the military footage, so innocent and vulnerable. As he watched, the cub's eyes opened for the first time. They were bright yellow like liquid gold, and they focused on Tom with surprising intelligence. The tiny creature made a soft chirping sound and tried to lift its head toward him. Tom reached out slowly and gently stroked the cub's head with one finger. The scales were warm and surprisingly soft. The cub leaned into his touch, making more soft chirping sounds. In that moment, Tom knew there was no going back. Whatever this creature would become, whatever dangers it might pose in the future, right, now it was just a baby that needed him. He had made his choice the moment he picked it up in that wrecked ship. Now he had to live with the consequences. The war between humans and Kitharans raged on in distant star systems, but here on Valthera 7, one human was about to raise the enemy's child as his own. Tom had no idea that this small act of compassion would one day change the course of galactic history. All he knew was that the tiny creature looking up at him with trusting eyes deserved a chance to live. He named the cub Ash after the gray color of its scales and began the most important job of his life. 3 weeks had passed since Tom found Ash, and keeping the tiny Kitharan alive had become the most challenging puzzle of his life. The cub refused every type of food Tom tried to offer, from synthetic proteins to mineral supplements. For 2 terrifying days, Ash had grown weaker and weaker, barely lifting his small head when Tom checked on him. Tom spent hours each day researching everything he could find about Kitharan biology in the station's database. Most of the information was military intelligence focused on how to kill them, not how to feed them. The few scientific studies were incomplete and often contradictory. Some claimed Kitharans were pure carnivores. Others suggested they needed specific minerals that were rare on most planets. The breakthrough came by accident. Tom was eating his lunch next to Ash's makeshift bed when he spilled some of his coffee. The dark liquid splashed onto a piece of rare crystal he had been examining earlier, and the mixture gave off a strange, sweet smell. Ash's head shot up immediately, his tiny nostrils flaring. For the first time in days, the cub seemed alert and interested. Tom carefully mixed a small amount of the dissolved crystal with water and offered it to Ash on his finger. The cub latched onto Tom's fingertip and sucked hungrily. Within minutes, Ash was more active than Tom had ever seen him, chirping and trying to crawl around his small enclosure. Over the following weeks, Tom experimented with different combinations until he found a mixture that made Ash thrive. The cub needed the rare crystals that Tom mined, but they had to be dissolved in a protein solution and heated to a specific temperature. It was expensive and time-consuming to prepare, but seeing Ash grow stronger made every effort worthwhile. Ash was growing fast. What started as a creature the size of Tom's fist was now as big as a house cat, with scales that had deepened to a rich bronze color. His claws were getting sharper, and Tom could see tiny teeth beginning to emerge. But despite his increasingly predatory appearance, Ash showed no aggression toward Tom. If anything, the cub seemed completely devoted to him. Every morning, Tom woke to find Ash curled up next to his bed, having somehow escaped from whatever enclosure Tom had built for him the night before. The cub followed Tom everywhere, staying close enough to touch but never getting in the way of his work. When Tom sat down to eat or work at his computer, Ash would settle beside him with a soft purring sound that Tom found surprisingly comforting. The most remarkable thing was how quickly Ash learned. Tom had started talking to the cub from the beginning, partly out of loneliness, and partly because he read that young animals developed better with constant interaction. Ash not only seemed to understand basic words, but he was beginning to respond to them appropriately. When Tom said, "Come," Ash would trot over to him. When Tom said, "Stay," the cub would sit and wait patiently. Tom began teaching Ash more complex commands and concepts. The cub learned his name quickly, and soon Tom was teaching him the names of objects around the station. Ash's intelligence was remarkable. He seemed to understand cause and effect, could solve simple problems, and even showed what looked like humor, playing tricks on Tom by hiding his tools or pretending to sleep when Tom called for him. But it was the emotional connection that truly amazed Tom. Ash seemed to sense Tom's moods, offering comfort when Tom was frustrated with work and showing excitement when Tom was happy. When Tom cut his hand on a sharp piece of metal, Ash had whined and gently licked the wound, just like a dog trying to help its injured owner. The isolation that had been wearing on Tom for months disappeared with Ash's presence. Having someone to talk to, even if that someone couldn't talk back, made the long days much more bearable. Tom found himself looking forward to mealtimes, when Ash would sit beside him and listen to Tom's stories about Earth, about his family, about his dreams for the future. Tom also began documenting everything about Ash's development. He recorded videos of the cub's growth, noted changes in his behavior, and carefully tracked what foods worked best. Partly this was scientific curiosity. No human had ever observed a young Kitharan in a natural environment. But mostly, Tom was creating a record because he knew that someday someone would demand to know how he had managed to raise a creature that everyone believed was impossible to domesticate. As Ash grew larger and more capable, Tom began to worry about what would happen when the supply ships arrived. Every 3 months, automated cargo vessels brought Tom food, equipment, and mail from home. The ships were unmanned, but they carried sensors that could detect life signs on the station. So far, Tom had been lucky. Ash was small enough to hide, and Tom had learned to mask his biosignature by keeping him in the station's small storage rooms during supply runs. But Ash was getting bigger, and he was becoming more attached to Tom. The last time Tom had tried to confine him during a routine system check, Ash had cried and scratched at the door until Tom let him out. The cub clearly didn't understand why he sometimes had to hide, and Tom wasn't sure how much longer he could manage it. There were other concerns, too. Tom's research had shown that adult Kitharans were incredibly strong and potentially dangerous. Even raised with love and care, Ash was still a predator. His claws could already scratch metal, and Tom had seen him crack thick crystals with his developing bite. What would happen when Ash was full-grown? Would their bond be strong enough to overcome his natural instincts? But these worries faded. When Tom watched Ash play with a ball made from scrap metal, or when the cub fell asleep with his head in Tom's lap while Tom read technical manuals aloud. Whatever Ash might become, right now he was just a young creature who trusted Tom completely and showed him affection in return. Tom had started having dreams about Ash's mother, the Kitharan female who had died protecting her cub. In his dreams, she would look at him with those same golden eyes and nod approval at how Tom was caring for her child. He wondered what she would think of seeing her son learning to understand human speech, playing with human toys, and seeking comfort from a human when he was scared or lonely. The war news that came with each supply shipment painted Kitharans as monsters without emotion or compassion. But Tom knew better now. Ash felt everything deeply. He showed joy, curiosity, affection, and even what looked like grief when Tom had to leave him alone for long periods. If Ash was capable of such complex emotions, what did that say about the rest of his species? Tom was beginning to understand that he wasn't just raising an alien pet. He was uncovering secrets about the Kitharan species that could change everything humans thought they knew about their enemies. But for now, those were concerns for the future. Today, Ash needed his afternoon feeding, and Tom needed to finish his mining reports. They had found their rhythm together, human and Kitharan, in the peaceful isolation of their small station among the stars. As Tom prepared Ash's food, the cub sat patiently beside him, watching with intelligent eyes and making soft, contented sounds. Tom smiled and scratched behind Ash's small head ridges, marveling at how something that was supposed to be humanity's enemy had become the best companion he had ever known. The emergency beacon cut through Tom's peaceful morning like a knife through silence. He had been teaching Ash how to sort different types of crystals by color, watching with pride as the young Kitharan carefully placed each piece in the correct container. At 6 months old, Ash was now the size of a medium dog, his bronze scales gleaming in the station's artificial light. Tom rushed to his communication console as the automated message played again. A human patrol ship was requesting emergency landing permission. Their engines had been damaged in a skirmish with Kitharan raiders, and they needed immediate repairs and medical assistance. The ship would arrive within the hour. Panic hit Tom like a physical blow. In all his planning for this moment, he had always imagined having more time to prepare. Ash was too big to hide in the storage lockers now, and too smart to stay quiet if he was frightened or confused. The young Kitharan had never seen any humans other than Tom, and Tom had no idea how he would react to strangers. Tom knelt beside Ash, who had stopped playing with the crystals and was watching Tom with concern. The cub always seemed to sense Tom's emotions, and now his golden eyes were wide with worry. "Listen to me very carefully," Tom said, keeping his voice calm despite the fear racing through his mind. "Some people are coming to visit us. They don't know about you, and they might be scared if they see you. I need you to stay in the back room and be very, very quiet. Can you do that for me?" Ash tilted his head. A gesture Tom had learned meant the cub was thinking hard about something. Then Ash made a soft, chirping sound and nodded, a behavior he had learned from watching Tom. Tom led Ash to the farthest storage room and quickly arranged supplies to make a comfortable hiding place. He left water and food, along with some of Ash's favorite toys. "I'll come back as soon as I can," he promised, scratching behind Ash's head ridges the way the cub loved. "Just stay quiet, no matter what you hear." The patrol ship landed with a thunderous roar that shook the entire station. Tom watched through his window as 6 heavily armed soldiers emerged, led by a stern-faced woman with captain's bars on her uniform. They moved with the careful precision of people who had seen too much combat, their weapons ready despite being on a supposedly safe human installation. Captain Rivers introduced herself and her team quickly. They needed engine parts, medical, supplies, and a place to rest while their ship underwent repairs. Tom did his best to act normal, but he could see the captain's sharp eyes taking in every detail of the station. "You've been alone out here for 8 months?" she asked as Tom showed them to the station's small common area. "That's a long time for a solo assignment." "I prefer the quiet," Tom replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Less distractions from the work." Sergeant Mills, a stocky man with suspicious eyes, was already exploring the station without permission. "This place is bigger than it looks from outside," he commented. "Lots of storage rooms. What do you keep in all of them?" "Equipment, supplies, mineral samples," Tom said. "The company likes us to keep detailed records of everything we extract." For 3 hours, Tom managed to keep the soldiers occupied in the main areas of the station. He helped them repair their ship, shared his food supplies, and answered their questions about Catharan activity in the area. All the while, he listened for any sound from the back room where Ash was hidden. The crisis came when Sergeant Mills decided to conduct what he called a security sweep of the station. "Protocol," he explained to Captain Rivers. "We need to make sure there are no threats or contraband before we can file our report." Tom's heart raced as Mills methodically worked his way through each room. There was nothing Tom could do to stop him without raising suspicion. He could only follow behind and hope that Ash understood the importance of staying hidden. Mills was examining the second-to-last storage room when they all heard it, a soft whining sound, like a dog in distress. The sergeant's hand immediately went to his weapon. "What was that?" Rivers demanded. I don't know," Tom lied, but his voice cracked with stress. Mills kicked open the door to the final storage room and raised his weapon. Inside, Ash was huddled in the corner, making small, distressed sounds. The young Catharan had grown anxious from being separated from Tom for so long, and the presence of strangers in his territory was clearly upsetting him. "Holy hell," Mills breathed, his finger on the trigger. "It's a Catharan." The other soldiers rushed forward, weapons drawn, but Captain Rivers held up a hand to stop them from firing immediately. She stared at Ash with a mixture of shock and professional curiosity. "It's just a juvenile," she said slowly. "But what's it doing here?" Tom stepped carefully between the soldiers and Ash. The young Catharan immediately stopped whining and moved toward Tom, clearly seeking comfort and protection. This movement made several soldiers tense, but Ash's body language was completely non-threatening. He pressed against Tom's legs and looked up at him with trusting eyes. "Please don't hurt him," Tom said quietly. "His name is Ash. I've been taking care of him." "Are you insane?" Mills shouted. "That thing will grow up to be a killing machine. We should destroy it now before it becomes a threat." But Captain Rivers was watching something remarkable. As Tom reached down to gently stroke Ash's head, the young Catharan relaxed completely. His aggressive posture melted away and he made soft, contented sounds. When Tom sat down beside him, Ash immediately curled up against his side, seeking comfort like any frightened animal would with its caregiver. "How long have you had it?" Rivers asked. 6 months, Tom admitted. "I found him in a crashed Catharan ship. His mother was dead, and he was dying. I couldn't just leave him." "This is against every regulation in the book," another soldier muttered. "Aiding the enemy, harboring dangerous aliens." "Look at him," Tom said desperately. "Does he look dangerous to you?" As if responding to his name, Ash lifted his head and looked directly at Captain Rivers. His golden eyes were calm and intelligent, showing none of the savage hunger that humans associated with Catharans. When Rivers took a careful step closer, Ash didn't react with aggression. Instead, he tilted his head curiously, the same way he did when Tom was teaching him something new. "Can you make him do tricks?" Rivers asked, her scientific mind taking over. Tom demonstrated some of the things Ash had learned. The young Catharan followed simple commands, sorted objects by color and shape, and even played a version of fetch, with a ball made from scrap metal. Most remarkably, when Tom pretended to be hurt, crying out and holding his arm, Ash immediately came to comfort him, nuzzling Tom gently and making worried sounds. The soldiers watched in stunned silence as their enemy's offspring showed behavior that contradicted everything they had been taught about Catharans. This creature wasn't a mindless predator. It was intelligent, emotional, and clearly capable of forming deep bonds with other species. "This changes things," Rivers said finally. Command needs to see this. You can't take him away, Tom said, his arm protectively around Ash. He's not a specimen or a weapon. He's just a child who lost his family. Before Rivers could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Tom's sensors had detected incoming ships, and the signature was unmistakable. Kitharan raiders heading straight for them. Ash's reaction was immediate and startling. The young Kitharan's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring as he tested the air. Then he began making rapid clicking sounds, his body tense with alertness. Tom had never seen Ash behave this way before. He knows they're coming, Rivers realized. His senses are picking up something our equipment missed. The first enemy shots impacted the station's shields as Ash continued his urgent clicking. Tom suddenly understood what the young Kitharan was trying to communicate. He's telling us about their attack pattern, Tom said with growing excitement. Those sounds, I think it's their tactical language. He learned it before I found him, and now he's translating their communications. Captain Rivers stared at Tom and Ash with new understanding. This wasn't just an alien pet or a scientific curiosity. This young Kitharan could be the key to understanding their enemies in ways no human ever had before. As the battle began outside, Tom held Ash close and whispered reassurances to him. The test had come sooner than expected, but it had revealed something extraordinary. Ash wasn't just a predator, raised by humans. He was a bridge between two species, a living proof that the war between them might not be as inevitable as everyone believed. The real question now was whether anyone would be alive long enough to understand what that meant. The research facility on Kepler Station buzzed with activity that had nothing to do with the war raging in distant star systems. For 2 months now, teams of scientists, linguists, and military analysts had been studying Ash, trying to understand what Tom Reed had discovered on his remote mining station. What they were learning challenged everything humanity thought it knew about their enemies. Dr. Sarah Chen, the facility's lead xenobiologist, watched through reinforced glass as Tom worked. With Ash in the observation room, the young Kitharan was now almost full-sized, standing nearly 6 feet tall with powerful muscles rippling beneath his bronze scales. His claws could tear through steel, and his bite could crush bone. By every measure, he should have been a terrifying predator. Instead, Ash was gently helping Tom arrange colored blocks in complex patterns, his massive claws handling the delicate pieces with surprising care. When he completed the puzzle correctly, Tom praised him and offered a treat. Ash's response was immediate. He made soft purring sounds and nuzzled Tom's shoulder affectionately. The bond between them is extraordinary, Dr. Chen noted into her recorder. Subject shows complete trust and emotional attachment to his human caregiver. Aggression levels remain at 0 despite full physical maturity. In the adjoining room, Dr. Marcus Webb was analyzing brain scans of Ash alongside comparative data from captured adult Kitharan warriors. The differences were striking and deeply troubling. Look at this, he told his colleague, Dr. Lisa Park, pointing to highlighted areas on the scan displays. Adult Kitharan brains show severe damage to the limbic system, particularly areas associated with emotional bonding and empathy. But Ash's brain is completely normal. More than normal, actually. His emotional centers are highly developed, more so than most humans. Dr. Park studied the scans with growing horror. This damage in the adults, it's not natural, is it? No, it's surgical, precise and deliberate. Someone has been systematically destroying the parts of their brains that make them capable of love, compassion, and peaceful cooperation. The implications were staggering. The Kitharan Empire hadn't simply trained their warriors to be ruthless. They had physically mutilated their children's brains to turn them into weapons. Meanwhile, in the linguistics lab, Dr. James Foster was making his own breakthrough. Ash had learned to communicate using a combination of spoken English, sign language, and his own species' natural clicking sounds. His intelligence was remarkable, easily matching that of an adult human, but it was his insights into Kitharan culture that were revolutionizing their understanding. "Tell me about your dreams," Dr. Foster said during one of their daily sessions. Ash's golden eyes grew distant and sad. Through their established communication system, he began to describe fragmented memories of warmth, safety, and love. He remembered his mother's gentle touch, the sound of other young ones playing, the feeling of being part of a caring family. "All young ones start this way," Ash communicated slowly. "Happy, safe. But then, the choosing comes. They take us away, change us, make us forget how to love." Dr. Foster's hands shook as he recorded this information. "Ash, do you remember? What happens during the choosing?" Ash's entire body shuddered, and he made distressed sounds. Tom immediately entered the room to comfort him, recognizing the signs of psychological distress. "That's enough for today," Tom said firmly, wrapping his arms around Ash's massive form. Despite his size and strength, the young Kitharan leaned into Tom's embrace like a frightened child. The research team was beginning to understand that they weren't just studying an alien species. They were documenting a systematic program of child abuse on a galactic scale. Dr. Chen called a meeting of all the senior researchers to discuss their findings. The conference room was heavy with the weight of their discoveries. "We need to face the truth," she began. "The Kitharan Empire isn't creating warriors through training or cultural conditioning. They're performing surgical brain modification on children to destroy their capacity for emotional connection. Which means," Dr. Webb continued, "that every Kitharan warrior we've fought, every monster we've killed, was originally a child like Ash. A child capable of love, friendship, and peaceful coexistence." The room fell silent as the full horror of this realization sank in. They weren't fighting a species of natural predators. They were fighting the victims of the most horrific child abuse imaginable. "There's more," Dr. Foster said quietly. "Ash has been telling me about something called the Underground. Apparently there are Kitharans within the Empire who oppose the choosing. They've been trying to save children by hiding them or helping them escape. That's probably how Ash's mother ended up in that crashed ship. She was running away to protect her child." Dr. Chen stood and began pacing. "This changes everything, every military strategy, every diplomatic approach, every assumption we've made about this war. The question is, what do we do with this information?" Dr. Park asked. Tom's voice came from the observation room's intercom system. They had forgotten he could hear their conversation. "We tell the truth," he said simply. "We show the galaxy what Ash really is, and we let them draw their own conclusions." Over the following weeks, the research team prepared their findings for presentation to military command and civilian leadership. They had video documentation of Ash's development, brain scans proving the artificial nature of adult Kitharan aggression, and linguistic evidence of the underground resistance within the Empire. But the most powerful evidence was Ash himself. In carefully controlled demonstrations, he showed human leaders that Kitharans were not the monsters they appeared to be. He displayed complex reasoning, emotional depth, creative thinking, and a strong moral sense. He understood concepts like fairness, compassion, and sacrifice. When asked why he didn't hate humans for fighting his species, Ash's response stunned everyone present. "Not my species anymore," he communicated sadly. "My people are the broken ones, the ones who forgot how to love. My family is Tom, and those who choose kindness over fear." The political implications were immediate and overwhelming. If the Empire was built on the systematic abuse of children, then the moral foundation of the war shifted dramatically. Humanity wasn't fighting against evil aliens. They were fighting against other victims of an evil system. Peace negotiations, which had been stalled for months, suddenly took on new urgency. The human delegation now had information that could potentially fracture the Empire from within. More importantly, they had proof that peaceful coexistence was not only possible, but natural for the Catharan species. Ash had become more than Tom's adopted child. He had become a symbol of hope, a living demonstration that enemies could become family, and that love could overcome even the most carefully engineered hatred. As Tom watched Ash help Dr. Chen organize research files, using his incredible intelligence to solve problems that had puzzled the human scientists, he marveled at how much had changed. The frightened, dying cub he had found in that wrecked ship had grown into something extraordinary, a bridge between two species, and perhaps the key to ending a war that should never have begun. The Empire had created their warriors by destroying the very thing that made Catharans who they were meant to be. But in trying to save one small life, Tom had preserved something far more precious, the proof that their true nature was not violence, but love. Now the question was whether the galaxy was ready to accept this truth, and whether it was strong enough to heal the wounds that generations of engineered hatred had created. 10 years after Tom Reed found a dying Catharan cub in the wreckage of a crashed ship, the galaxy was a different place entirely. The war that had consumed billions of lives and countless resources was over, ended not by superior firepower or strategic brilliance, but by the simple truth of what one human and one alien could become together. Ambassador Ash stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Peace Council, his imposing 7-foot frame dressed in the formal robes of his office. His bronze scales gleamed under the chamber's lights, and his golden eyes held the wisdom and compassion that had made him the most respected diplomat in known space. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had lived through the transformation of two civilizations. 5 years ago, Ash began, his English flawless despite the clicking undertones that marked his species, the Catharan Empire collapsed not from external pressure, but from internal revolution. When the truth of the choosing was revealed, when parents learned what was being done to their children, the entire foundation of their society crumbled in a matter of months. In the audience, Tom Reed watched with quiet pride. Now in his 50s, Tom had become something of a legend himself, though he remained uncomfortable with the attention. Beside him sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of the integration program, and Captain Rivers, now an admiral who had played a crucial role in the peaceful transition. The statistics Ash presented were remarkable. Over 3 million young Catharans had been rescued before the surgical brain modification that would have turned them into warriors. Underground networks within the Empire, once forced to work in secret, had emerged as the new leadership of their species. The former warriors, those whose brains had been damaged, were receiving experimental treatments to restore their capacity for emotional connection. But the true victory, Ash continued, lies not in numbers, but in understanding. We have learned that the differences between our species are far smaller than the similarities. We have learned that intelligence, compassion, and the desire for family are not uniquely human traits. Most importantly, we have learned that love is stronger than the fear that divides us. In the years following the revelation of Ash's true nature, mixed communities had sprouted throughout human space. Young Catharans, rescued from the Empire's conditioning programs, grew up alongside human children in schools that Tom had helped design. These institutions became laboratories of cooperation, where two species learned to see past their differences and focus on their shared dreams. The Reed Foundation, named in Tom's honor despite his protests, operated over 200 such schools across the galaxy. Children who should have been enemies played together, learned together, and formed friendships that their parents' generation could never have imagined. Catharan cubs taught human children about enhanced sensory perception and spatial reasoning, while human children shared their gift for abstract thinking and technological innovation. Dr. Vasquez often visited these schools to document their success. What she found consistently amazed her. The mixed classes outperformed single-species groups in almost every measure of academic and social development. The children didn't see species differences as barriers. They saw them as advantages that made their teams stronger. When a human child struggles with a math problem, she had written in her latest report, their Kitharan classmate naturally offers help by approaching the problem from a different angle. When a young Kitharan feels overwhelmed by social situations, human children instinctively provide emotional support. They've created a culture of mutual aid that their ancestors couldn't have conceived. But it was the psychological studies that revealed the deepest truths. Children raised in these mixed environments showed remarkable resistance to prejudice and hatred. They had learned from their earliest years that appearance meant nothing compared to character. A generation was growing up that would find the old hatreds as foreign and incomprehensible as their grandparents found the idea of peace. Ash himself had become a father figure to hundreds of rescued cubs, but his relationship with Tom remained special. Every evening, no matter how busy his diplomatic schedule, Ash would visit Tom's quarters for what they still called family time. They would share a meal, discuss the day's events, and often just sit together in comfortable silence that spoke of years of understanding. "Do you ever regret it?" Tom had asked one evening, shortly after Ash's appointment as ambassador. "Giving up a normal life among your own people?" Ash had tilted his head in the gesture Tom remembered from his cubhood. "You are my people," he had replied simply. "You taught me that family is not about blood or species. It is about choice, about love, about being willing to sacrifice for each other's happiness." The former Empire territories were slowly transforming. Under the leadership of the Underground, now calling itself the Free Kitharan Coalition, they had established rehabilitation centers for the damaged warriors, research facilities dedicated to understanding the long-term effects of the brain modifications, and most importantly, protection networks to ensure that no child would ever, again, be subjected to the choosing. The military applications of the new alliance were remarkable, though they were used now for exploration rather than conquest. Human creativity combined with Kitharan strength and sensory abilities had opened up previously impossible frontiers. Joint crews explored dangerous nebulae, established colonies on hostile worlds, and pushed the boundaries of known space farther than either species could have managed alone. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The old human fear of the predator aliens had been replaced by a deep respect for their former enemies' resilience and strength. Kitharan art, music, and philosophy had found eager audiences among humans, while Kitharan youth embraced human concepts of individual freedom and personal choice. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. There were still those on both sides who clung to old hatreds, who saw cooperation as betrayal of their species' pure heritage. Terrorist groups operated in the shadows, trying to reignite the war through violence and propaganda. But they found little support among populations that had tasted the benefits of peace. Admiral Rivers, now retired and serving as a military historian, often spoke to academy classes about the psychological impact of the war's end. "We spent 3 years learning to see Kitharans as monsters," she would tell her students. "It took less than 3 months to realize we had been fighting the victims of monsters instead." That kind of paradigm shift changes how you see everything, including your own capacity for both cruelty and compassion. Tom's role in galactic history was secure, though he remained the reluctant hero he had always been. Biographers wanted to write his story, politicians wanted to honor him with medals and ceremonies, and historians wanted to analyze every decision he had made in that crashed ship 10 years ago. Tom declined most such requests, preferring to focus on his work with the Foundation and his quiet life with Ash. When pressed by journalists about what had motivated him to save an enemy's child, Tom's answer never varied. "I didn't save an enemy. I saved a baby who needed help. Everything else was just politics and prejudice, getting in the way of doing what was right." The Empire's former territories still whispered stories of the human who had changed everything, by refusing to let a small life end in the darkness of space. To them, Tom Reed had become a mythical figure, proof that even in the darkest times, individual acts of compassion could reshape the course of history. But Tom knew the real hero of the story was Ash himself. The cub who had trusted a stranger, who had learned to love across species barriers, who had grown into a leader capable of bridging two civilizations. Tom had provided care and protection, but Ash had provided something far more precious: proof that the future could be different from the past. As Ash concluded his speech to the Peace Council, he looked directly at Tom and made a gesture that only the two of them understood. The same gentle head tilt that had marked their first real communication years ago. The Empire feared Tom Reed not because he was a warrior, but because he was a teacher, Ash said in closing. He taught one small Kytherin that love was possible, and that small Kytherin taught it to others, and they taught it to still others. Fear spreads through violence, but love spreads through example. In the end, love proved stronger. The delegates rose in sustained applause, but Tom's attention was focused entirely on Ash. In the ambassador's golden eyes, Tom could still see traces of the tiny cub who had once fit in the palm of his hand, who had trusted him completely when trust should have been impossible. That night, as they had done for 10 years, Tom and Ash shared dinner together, talking about everything and nothing, a human and a Kytherin who had accidentally changed the galaxy simply by choosing to see past their differences to the person underneath. The war that had threatened to consume both species was over. In its place was something that neither side had dared imagine: a future built on understanding rather than fear, on cooperation rather than domination, on the simple truth that love could indeed conquer all. And it had all started with one man's refusal to let a helpless creature die alone in the dark.